Welcome to South Africa's first ever clinical cannabis convention. Yay. My name is Keith Scott, and I'd like to thank you all very much for supporting this timely, science and evidence-driven symposium about the much maligned and misunderstood cannabis plant. So thank you all for being here today. One of the reasons why this event is so important for healthcare workers in particular is that the use of cannabis is so prevalent throughout the country that whether we know it or not, we all have patients who take cannabis in one form or another. And fortunately today, we have a golden opportunity to hear from the foremost authorities on the subject. In that vein, I understand that many people here have come to practitioners learn more about the clinical applications of cannabis and how to deal with patients who come to them taking cannabis for therapeutic purposes, taking the oil or smoking it. Unfortunately, we can't, this is not really a course, we can't go into that in detail. Some of our speakers will cover it, but we have to understand that in the country you can't practice legally with cannabis. As a practitioner, you could get into trouble for even recommending it or prescribing it. And that's on the bad news side, but we do need drug law reform. And that's what the trial is all about. That's what a lot of the speakers are involved with. And we need to understand the basis of drug law reform and how to go about it. So without drug law reform, we don't really have anything. But the good news on that side is that you might have noticed on your program I think there's a hashtag somewhere that you can use. Hashtag CCC. And, but please, the sound will interfere with the broadcast because this event is being streamed live and obviously recorded. And at the end of the day, we have a cash bar at the end of the event later, so please stay and mingle, etc. And finally, a request from the management of this venue. With a title like we've got, they've requested that nobody smokes cannabis on the premises. So please respect that. But you can drink alcohol, which is apparently safer. All right. Right now, we're very privileged to have at one event the top national, top local, and international experts on all aspects of the cannabis plant. Most of them are either expert witnesses at the trial of the plant in the Gauteng High Court or the lawyers for the Dagga couple at that case. And as you know, the trial of the plant has just finished its first week, first of 3 weeks. And so, we're very grateful to all of these, the speakers today, for giving their time and making themselves available to speak at this convention. Right now, we're all going to learn a huge amount today. And thanks to the high quality and integrity of the speakers, we can be certain that what they tell us will have a strong scientific foundation, be evidence-based, and be free of commercial and political agendas. But before we delve into the finer details of all the fascinating aspects of cannabis, I'd like to take a look at what I call the fundamental realities that underlie drug use and the drug laws that apply to that. When discussing drug law reform, it's all too easy to slip into arguments concerning only one or two aspects of what is actually a multifaceted issue. And therefore, I find that when one becomes involved in such a discussion, it pays to keep these universally applicable realities in mind, because it enables us to stand back and take a broad overview of the subject. Before I outline these factors, I'd like to read a quote from a recent speech given by Mark Haywood at this year's Nelson Mandela Day Community Leadership Awards. And in this speech, in this particular extract, Mark's talking about simplicity, and I think it applies to the drug issue, which can become quite complex. I'll quote him: "Simplicity does not mean denying or dumbing down complexity. It means finding ways to understand and convey complexity in a manner that allows real engagement with the issues we face. There is simplicity in every complexity. Simplicity does not mean talking down to people. It means understanding and then unraveling an issue until you can explain its essence." End of quote. So in the talks today, you will find a fascinating array of complexity surrounding cannabis, etc. Because any event that includes neurology, physiology, psychology, pharmacology, botany, drug policies, and the law is bound to be complex. And that's why the Gauteng High Court has allowed 3 weeks for the trial. Because scientific research unravels complexity, and it makes things more understandable and enables us to find their essence in simplicity. For me, this handful of universal realities that underlie drug use and drug law harms is the key to understanding the essence of the broader drug issue. Right, so fundamental reality number one. There is sound archaeological and historical evidence to show that humans have always taken psychoactive substances. At any given moment in time, a part of the human population has sought pleasure or relief by ingesting psychoactive substances, whether they be natural or synthetic. So the desire for drugs is in our genes. In fact, sometimes even the drugs themselves are hidden in a little banky in our genes. So remember that. Now, over 80% of the fundamental reality number two, over 80% of people who use a drug for the first time never use that drug again. Most people try a drug for the first time either out of curiosity or because of peer pressure, not because a drug dealer forces them to do that. And most of them don't carry on using it because the effects weren't as they were expected to be, or they were just downright unpleasant for that person. Fundamental reality number two, over 80% of people who sample a drug for the first time never use that drug again. Oh, sorry, I've spoken about that. Okay, let's go. Fundamental reality number three, of those who continue using a drug on a regular basis, fewer than 10% will actually develop substance use disorders. As is the case with alcohol, by far the majority of people who use a drug will not go on to become addicted to that drug. And this brings me to fundamental reality number four, and Daryl Gates, who was the chief of police in the Los Angeles Police Department in the 1970s. Now, Daryl Gates was a firm believer and enforcer of Richard Nixon's amped-up war on drugs, knew what he was talking about when he said, and I quote, "All casual users of drugs should be taken out and shot." That's what he said. Casual users. He didn't say all drug addicts, drug pushers, and drug lords should be taken out and shot. He said the casual users. And that's because he understood that, he said it's because it's not the casual users of drugs that drive the drug trade. He understood that. I mean, it's not the addicts. It's the casual users because they form the majority of the drug market. And because drug manufacturers, drug lords, and drug pushers no more drive the drug trade than do wine farmers, beer brewers, or bottle stores drive the liquor trade. They all supply a market that has been around forever. That is a proportion of the human population that likes taking psychoactive substances. So in theory, Daryl Gates's distorted philosophy was quite correct. And he said it, that quote was almost said tongue-in-cheek, but he was making a point, obviously. And then he went and probably shot a whole lot of people. But he fully appreciated that although recreational drug use is prevalent in all socioeconomic groups, it's those in the upper strata, in the middle and upper income groups, who seldom get prosecuted for their infractions. While it's the lower socioeconomic groups that bear the brunt of the punitive drug laws. And he knew that. Okay, fundamental reality number 5. Most of those who develop substance use disorders have manageable psychosocial issues or overt mental illnesses. And this is often the result of abuse, adverse childhood experiences, or dire social circumstances. And it is these unfortunate members of society who, instead of being protected by the law and their fellow citizens, are scapegoated and trampled upon by both the criminal justice system and the criminal underworld itself. And I'm sad to say, to have to say this, but it has to be said, in this country particularly, the medical profession's passivity and sometimes downright obstructionism on the drug law issue is actually making the situation far worse, and we need to change that. So I hope those of you in the medical profession will get involved more in drug law reform. Fundamental reality number 6, and this is very important. Drug use in itself is a victimless crime. Unfortunately, this fact is seldom at the forefront of drug policy reform discussions. It seems to get lost somewhere, but it really should be. This contention is so obvious that I'm convinced that the Gauteng High Court will come to the same conclusion, that someone smoking, vaping, or ingesting cannabis is doing no more harm than the person who has a beer after a game of tennis, a couple of glasses of wine for dinner, and a postprandial cognac and cigar a bit later. Illicit drug use per se is a victimless crime, and therefore it shouldn't be a crime at all. And by extension, if drug use is a victimless crime, why should someone who makes a psychoactive substance and sells that substance to someone who actually wants that substance be guilty of a crime? Why is it a crime to grow and sell cannabis while it's completely legal to grow wine grapes, make wine, brew beer, and sell those products, while the making and selling of psychoactive substances, other psychoactive substances, is illegal? Doesn't make sense. The crimes do occur when drugs are banned and their manufacture, sale, and regulation end up in the hands of criminals. The USA prohibition of alcohol in the 1920s is the prime example whereby the ban of a psychoactive substance, in that case alcohol, does more harm than does the substance itself. In the same way, the dreadful United Nations drug treaties have caused far more individual and social harm than have those banned drugs themselves. It's a mirror image of American alcohol prohibition. These treaties have had the unintended consequences of increasing drug use, accelerating the global rise in organized crime, and a corresponding fracturing of societal structures around the world. And finally, these all lead up to fundamental reality number 7, and that is the legal regulation of cannabis, not a free-for-all, legal regulation as we do with alcohol, and all other psychoactive drugs is the only workable, holistic, and humanistic drug policy framework to use. And there are two main reasons for this. Firstly, if you ban a drug for which there's a ready market, you immediately increase the value of that drug and hand its production, potential tax revenues, and control to criminals and corrupt factions within the criminal justice system. And to validate this irrefutable premise, you need look no further than the current situation of cannabis versus alcohol. It's that simple. It's a simple comparison. Secondly, prohibition means those with substance use disorders are shunned by society, are forced to turn to crime in order to sustain their access to drugs. And if we agree that the majority of people who develop substance use disorders suffer with mental illnesses or have psychosocial problems, then it's easy to appreciate that it's precisely those unfortunate individuals who will bear the brunt of our draconian drug laws. Now, a prime example of this is fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. This irreversible condition that affects millions, yes, I think it's over 5 million South Africans have this disorder, is caused by the exposure of the fetus to alcohol. The neurological damage associated with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder causes numerous behavioral and learning problems that make it extremely difficult for those with this condition to cope with everyday life. They have difficulty understanding this complex world, have poor judgment, and are easily led and manipulated by others. These damaged individuals are prime fodder for gangs and are usually introduced to drugs and crime at a very early age. We have a big problem with this in the Western Cape, as you know. Owing to their poor judgment and weak coping skills, they are often used as scapegoats by both the criminals and the police. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is one of the most tragic ironies of the drug war, where a legal drug, alcohol, causes an incurable disease in people who, instead of being protected by society, are consigned by that same society to a bewildering life of hopelessness, recidivism, addiction, misery, and suffering. How am I doing for time? Okay, so I'll just whip through the benefits of legal regulation for those who aren't aware of the concept. I'll go through a few points. Legal regulation will allow the implementation of significant harm reduction measures for both recreational users and those with substance use disorders. As it already does with alcohol, legal regulation will ensure drug purity, quality, and standardization. Legal regulation will allow unfettered scientific research into many aspects of drug use that includes the use of currently illicit drugs to treat addiction and both mental and physical illnesses. And you'll hear more about that from the world expert on those, that research, Professor David Nutt, who's here with us today. And legal regulation will go a long way to help curtail the criminal violence and corruption associated with prohibition-enabled drug cartels and syndicates. And legalizing and taxing the drug trade will boost the national fiscus and substantially reduce the cost of the failed war on drugs. And last but not least, let me repeat that. And last but not least, it will at last enable us to smoke our joints in peace. I made that up, but that's not, I haven't finished. Thank you, Jan. That just came up. Okay. So I'm just going to quickly summarize those fundamental principles because they really are important to keep in mind because they actually make it simple but actually very understandable, the whole concept of drug law reform. Number one, the desire for psychoactive substances is in our gene, in our DNA. Most people who try a drug for the first time never use that drug again. The majority of people who use drugs do not develop substance use disorders. Recreational drug users are the main drivers of the drug trade. Most of those who develop substance use disorders have manageable underlying psychosocial problems. Drug use in itself is a victimless crime. And legal regulation is the only workable, holistic, and humanistic drug policy framework. Now, I'm sure that most of you will concur that the only way to deal comprehensive and fairly with the drug issue is to take a pragmatic and humanistic approach to the drafting of constitutionally compatible laws based on scientific evidence and common sense. And I hope that by the end of the trial of the plant, we'll find that the judges agree with us. Thank you very much. Right, now we move on to the first real speakers of the day, and that is Myrtle Clark and Julian Stobbs, who will be speaking about their non-profit company, Fields of Green for All. Now, many of you may not know it, but this event was to paraphrase the title of Trevor Noah's latest book, Born of a Crime. This cannabis convention was both conceived and born of a crime. If the Dacher couple had not been arrested for possession of cannabis a number of years ago, we would not be sitting here at this event today. Now, they'll tell you the Fields of Green for All story themselves, but being the modest people they are, they'll gloss over the fact that it is required an enormous amount of courage, fortitude, and resources to take this court case as far as they have. In the process, they have managed to persuade the best and most appropriate expert witnesses to give evidence at the trial of the plant. And as if that wasn't enough, they convened this amazing event right in the middle of the trial. So on that note, please join me in giving a rousing welcome to Jules Stobbs and Myrtle Clark, the Dacher couple. Thank you.